Good morning. Today we are working on Po28. I can write proportions and solve proportions. We're going to be continuing that work that we were doing with those rates, and we're now working with proportions. This is our last objective for this unit. So tomorrow is a retake day. Khan Academy will be assigned. So we have that regular Friday. Monday, we're going to correct this. So you need to have it done by Monday. Monday, we're also going to review this unit to go back over all the learning that we've done. Practice tests will be on Tuesday, real test on Wednesday. So that's what's coming up next week. So let's look at Po28. It is a PO. Remember those POs you have to pass. All right, you have to keep retaking it until you get it passed. So it's an important one. Recall that a proportion is any fractions, rates, or ratios that are equivalent. Oh my goodness, we've been working with equivalent fractions and equivalent ratios and equivalent rates. Woo. We've worked with all of these. Now, we're going to look at them as a proportion. So when they are equivalent, they are proportionate to each other. That means that we're multiplying the top and the bottom by that same scale factor. We're multiplying by the same number, or we're dividing by that same number. So we're finding those equivalent fractions. They are proportionate because they're going up or down by the same amount. So knowing this, you can write proportions and solve proportions with a missing value. Don't forget to put your units in the same place in each proportion. So when I told us in our last objective, make sure you label it, okay? So if we had the money on top and the cartons on the bottom, in the equivalent fraction, it needed to be money on top with the cartons on the bottom. Right, we have to make sure whatever's on top in the first is on top in the second. So that same measurements. So we're going to see what that looks like. So it says write a proportion for each statement below. So this section, a little bit easier. What do you think my first rate is, Emma? Oh. Good. I like how you changed it to include the measurements. So we're just taking that first one, 2 cups for 3 batches. Now what's our second one? Ma'am? 18 cups with 27 batches. How do I know that these are proportionate? How do I know, Sophie? Sophie is absolutely right. To go from 2 to 18, I multiplied by 9. To go from 3 to 27, I multiplied by the same number. So I know that they are proportionate. They are equal to each other. They're equivalent. So if they are equivalent, they are proportionate. So we're just learning a new vocabulary word for what we already know. We know they're equivalent. We've worked a lot with equivalent. Now we're throwing in the new word of proportionate. It means the same thing. Let's look at our next one. What would my rate be? James?
$6 and 12 apples.
$6 for 12 apples. What would my second rate be? Lexi?
18 and 36 apples.
$18 with 36 apples. How do I know that these are proportionate? Bennett?
Is there
What am I multiplying them each by? I'm multiplying both the top and the bottom by 3. 6 times 3 is 18. 12 times 3 is 36. I know they are equal. which means they are equivalent and they are proportionate. Because if it is equivalent, it is proportionate. So if you can find what you're multiplying up by or dividing down by, you can prove that they are equivalent and proportionate. You are going to do those two. Okay, that's the pretty basic part of today's lesson. We're just putting the words into our rates and making sure that they are proportionate, that they are equivalent. Now we're gonna work on a little bit more challenging, stretching our brains a little bit, just a little bit. It says, write a proportion that describes each situation. Then solve it for the missing value. Using rates or cross products, show your work. So we have multi-steps going on now. All with stuff that we already know. So it's nothing new, we're just putting it together. So our first one says, you are allowed to watch 3 hours of TV in one weekend. It doesn't have the number 1 there, but it says a weekend. So when it says a weekend, we know it's 1 weekend. How many hours of TV can you watch in 4 weekends? What do you think my first rate is going to look like, Adeline?
3 hours in 1 weekend.
3 hours over 1 weekend. What's my second rate going to look like? There's going to be a question mark because it's asking a question. How many hours of TV can you watch in 4 weekends? How do you think I should write this rate? What do you think, Maddie?
You can question mark hours over 4 weeks.
Perfect. Question mark hours, because that's what it's asking us, how many hours. So I'm going to put my question mark there. And then I see it's 4 weekends. So knowing what we know about equivalent, what we now know about proportionate, can we figure out how many hours we can watch in 4 weekends? What should I do? Lexi?
You have to multiply 1 by 4 to get 4 weekends. So if you multiply 3 by 4, you get 12.
Perfect. Lexi knows to go from 1 to 4, we're multiplying by 4. Whatever we multiply the bottom by, we have to multiply the top by. So 3 times 4 equals 12 hours. So that question mark becomes that 12. James?
If we're doing this, do we have to write the bottom part or just the top?
What do you think, James?
Oh yeah.
We're writing out the full complete rates, top and bottom, labels for both, because you want to make sure your hours match up with your hours, weekend matches up with the weekend. You definitely need to write it all. No shortcuts. It says show your work, and in order to make sure that you're doing it correctly, you need to show your work. Okay? I show my work. You show your work. That's how we know we're doing it correctly. Let's do the next one. Your famous recipe for barbecue sauce uses 2 cups of brown sugar per batch. How many cups will you need to make 7 batches? What do you think our first rate should look like? What should I write? Emma?
2 cups.
One what?
1 batch.
Very good. It doesn't say 1 batch, it says per batch. We need to know that per batch, we need to know that per batch equals 1. So it's 2 cups of that brown sugar over 1 batch. What is my second rate going to look like? Where am I putting the question mark? Where am I putting my labels? What should it look like? Adeline?
Question mark cups over 7 batches.
question mark for the cups, that's what our question is asking. And we know there are 7 batches, making sure you have cups to cups, batches to batches. How do I solve it? Natalie,
You're gonna multiply it by 7.
why would I multiply by 7, Natalie?
Because 1 times 7 is 7.
Yeah, to go from the 1 batch to the 7 batches, I have to multiply by 7. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So how many cups of brown sugar do I need, Sophie? 14, because 2 times 7 equals 14. So my answer is 14 cups. Let's do the next one. In 4 games this season, you have scored 10 goals. At this rate, how many goals will you score in 14 games? What's my first rate going to look like? Let's see if I can get a hand up that hasn't gone up yet. Who thinks they know? What's the first rate going to look like, Lila?
10 goals.
So I've got 10 goals. Remember, a rate has a top and a bottom. Do you want that goals on top or on bottom?
On the top.
So it's 4 games, 10 goals
On the bottom.
on the bottom, because it's the second number that we heard. So we're gonna put those 10 goals on the bottom, so what do you think we need to put on the top, Lila?
The 4 games.
4 games. 4 games came first, so I'm gonna put that on the top. 10 goals came second, so I'm putting that on the bottom. What's my second rate going to look like? Maddie.
Question mark games over 14 goals.
So you said question mark games over 14 goals. Let's look at the information we're given. Let's read it one more time. We're so used to putting that question mark on the top for the first 2, but look at this. How many goals will you score in 14 games? Did you match them up right? No. We're so used to putting that question mark on the top, but the question mark doesn't always have to go on the top. It's asking us how many goals, so my question mark goes down by the goals. And it's telling us there's 14 games, so I'm gonna put that 14 on top. We're gonna do the same math though. It's super important that when we read the information given to us, we don't just assume, oh, question mark on top, other one on the bottom, okay? It can flip, but we're doing the same math to solve it. What do you think? Oh, this is a complicated one. What do you think we're gonna do to solve this? Do you have a guess, James? What was that?
Divide it.
What should I divide, James?
150.
By?
4.
James is absolutely right. If we don't know how to multiply it up, 4 times what equals 14? I don't know off the top of my head. Quite honestly, I have no idea, right? It's not a multiplication fact. It's not 2 times 7 is 14. It's 4 times something is going to be 14. So if I look at it and I go, ooh, that's not an easy one, I can't multiply up, I'm going to divide backwards. Because I know with my fact families, 2 times 7 is 14. 14 divided by 7 is 2. Right? I can work it backwards. So this is when calculators help us. What is 14 divided by to get us 4? 14 divided by 4 is what, Adeline? No, 14 divided by 2 is 7, not 4. What am I going to do? I'm going to put in 14 divided by 4 gets me what number, Nolan?
3.5.
3.5. If you do 14 and you divide it by 4, you get 3.5. So that tells me to multiply up 4 times 3.5, I'm going to get what? 14. Now I know what to multiply my other number by? I can say 10 times 3.5 gets me what? Again, calculators are our friends. 10 times 3.5 gets me what, Bridget? 35. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't have it written down on, that's interesting. So I know that it's going to be 35 goals. Because I multiplied that 10 by 3.5. Does that make sense? If you don't know off the top of your head what to multiply up with, you divide down. And it'll get you what that scale factor is to multiply by. So then you multiply your other number by that same number. So let's look at our second page. We can see on this second page we have lots of word problems just like that. You're going to set it up the exact same way that we just did together. You're going to figure out what your first rate is, labeling it, then figure out what your second rate is, putting the question mark in the correct spot. Then you have to find that scale factor, and you have to multiply to find that missing number. Okay, so it's multi-steps. We go one step at a time. So try to work out this top one on your own. You try your best to get 8 hours of sleep each night. How many hours will you sleep over the next week? So if you try to get 8 hours of sleep each night, how can we figure out how many hours of sleep over the next week? I'm going to have you work it out quietly on your own. And then when you think you know the two different rates that we're putting down, raise your hand. Or, no, give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up when you get both rates written down. So what's the first rate? And then what's the second rate? So you're going to give me that thumbs up when you have your two rates written down. So before you even use that calculator, show me your thumb if you have two rates written down. You have to have those rates written down before you can use that calculator. So what would my first rate be off that first part of the question, and what is the second rate? Jack, do you think you know the first rate?
8, 7.
So, say it again for me, louder.
8, 7.
Okay, so we have the 8. 8 what? Remember, labels are important.
8 hours and 7 days.
Okay, now, where did you get 7 days from?
From the week.
Okay, look at our first rate. 8 hours of sleep each night. So each night would be, our label is going to be night. So we have hours to nights. How many nights are in that first rate?
1.
1, because it says each night. So that tells me 1 night. So knowing that it's 8 hours to 1 night, how many hours will you sleep over the next week? I like what Jack was thinking. He's thinking, well, we had 1 night, and then we have a week. And Jack did the math in his head, and he said, oh, I can't do weeks and nights. I need to convert it to be the same. Because we want hours on top, and we want nights on the bottom. And he knows, when we say night, a day, it means the same thing. And how many of them are in 1 week, Jack?
7.
7. What am I going to put for the hours, Jack?
56?
Oh, hold on. When I write out my rate, if it says how many hours, what do I put when I write it out? That question mark, right? You were jumping ahead. So our first rate was 8 hours of sleep in one night. Our second rate was question mark hours. That's what it's asking me about. In a week is 7 nights. I need to be able to compare nights to nights. I can't say one night to 1 week. Doesn't work that way. It has to be the same measurement. So if it's not the same measurement, we need to convert like Jack did. Now, Jack, what math did you do to solve this?
Because 1 times 7 is 7, and you have to do it for both ones.
In order to go from 1 night to 7 nights, you had to multiply by 7. Whatever we're doing to the bottom, we're going to do to our top. So 8 times 7, he knows is 56. So that becomes 56 hours. I would love to sleep for 56 hours. Oh, I'd feel like a bear hibernating. That would feel so nice. Any questions on how to set up our rates? Show me with your thumbs, how are you feeling about this? Awesome. Some of us are a little, I'm a little shaky. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to have us work it out. When you get to that second question and you've worked it out, come check in with me and see if you wrote your rates correctly. Okay, but I want to give the people who had the thumbs up that chance to go and get it all done. Don't forget to finish those easy ones from the front page. That middle of the front page started with the easy ones. Work on the filling in those question marks on that second page. Come check in with me when you get done with this one. If you're not sure, if you were one of my shaky thumbs, come check in and we'll see if you got the rates correct, if you put them down the right way, okay? If you are watching this at home, remember, we are correcting on Monday because tomorrow is a retake day. So if we need extra time, you can work on it tonight. If there's any that you're like, this doesn't make sense, logically it does not make sense, or I'm really not understanding it, I can help us tomorrow in class also. Okay. So if you're at home, I hope you are well. I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.